All right, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to help trauma therapists be their incredible selves, to be human, to be real, not just a clinician. I'm a big believer in who we are is more important than what we know. And this requires cultivating authenticity, genuineness, and vulnerability, and that requires intention. You can learn more about my courses and workshops by going to thetraumatherapistproject.com. That's thetraumatherapistproject.com. Let's get started. All right, here we go. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the podcast. Very excited to have back Jan Winhall. Jan, welcome.
Thank you so much, guys. Great to be back here. I think we were saying it's the third time I've been with you, and lots has happened over those three times. I don't know if it's 3 years, maybe. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we'll dive into that. So Jan began her career as a social worker and psychotherapist 40 years ago. She began listening with non-pathologizing ears and heard shocking stories of sexual torture and responses that confused her. As she continued to listen, she learned that somehow these self-harming behaviors were actually, quote, helping individuals to escape intolerable emotional states. They were shifting their mood from flooding anxiety to numbing deadness or vice versa. Because these behaviors were so helpful, they were compulsively repeated and often became addictions. Jan's book, Treating Trauma and Addiction with Felt Sense Polyvagal Model, bottom-up approach, is a result of rethinking the felt sense experience model that she wrote about in her book, Merging Practice and Focusing Oriented Psychotherapy in 2014. Jan's integrated the polyvagal lens theory to create a more sophisticated way of understanding emotional regulation, where addictive behavior is an embodied response to emotional dysregulation. Welcome again. So remind our listeners before we get going here, Jan, where you're from originally and where you are currently.
Which is the same
background.
The same place. Yeah. I'm originally from Toronto, Canada, and I'm still here because it's a great place to live.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So as we were kind of chatting in the pre-interview time, you said, I said, so what did you want to share today? And you said becoming more embodied. What does that mean to you? What do you mean?
I mean that I think the shift we are making in the trauma world over 40 years now that I've been here, more and more towards appreciating body wisdom, appreciating the ways in which our bodies carry so much information about how we're living our lives. And we've really been cut off from that, in this kind of very Western worldview that we have, which really values thinking, conceptualizing. And so you see these lots of different programs in cognitive behavioral work, which I think is great, but I think it's only great when it is shared with people in an embodied way. So what I mean by that is really working with the felt sense, which is Gendlin's work, which is where I began. So lucky to have begun there, working, really studying with Eugene Gendlin, who coined the term felt sense. Over 40 years ago.
Mm-hmm. When you said that, I think last time I brought up this quote by him that I love. I mean, to me, it just encapsulates everything that I love, and it really inspires me. And he talks about just that, that felt sense and that authenticity. And he said, what does he say? Do you remember the quote?
I think it's in The Primacy of Human Presence that I sent to you, but I'm not sure exactly, but it's worth looking up.
Yeah. It's the essence of working with another person is to be present as a living being. And that's lucky, because if we had to be smart or good or mature or wise, then we would probably be in trouble.
Be in trouble.
But what matters is not that.
Not
what matters is to be a human being with another human being, to recognize the other person as another being in there. What does that mean to you?
Isn't that so beautiful? I start almost every training I do. That is the primacy of human presence. I sent it to you after. And he says, even if it's a bird, to take the time to see, like you and I are seeing, oh, there's another human being here. This is Guy. This is another person. And in order to be able to be with you fully present, and Jenlin goes on and shows us how to do that in that quote. You take all your thoughts, everything you've been taught, and you put it beside you. And then you take all of your feelings and your experiencing and your lived experience, and you put it on the other side of you. And then there's just you in this open space that, in polyvagal language, you can stay in a ventral place and feel safe enough to hear people who think differently than you, who look differently than you, who act differently than you, who may offend you. But you hear them and you experience them freshly, Jenlin would say. And then putting your feelings on the other side, so that dysregulated feelings, like we talk about in the nervous system and polyvagal language a lot, right? The states of threat, flight, fight, freeze, and shutting down. That when we can regulate ourselves enough to be present in a ventral way, then we can really be open to hearing and experiencing freshly. And that's really what presence is, right?
Now, what is your specific love within that? Because as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, this, for many people who become traumatized, is almost the antithetical state, right? It's number one, to feel embodied, to be safe in their embodied.
It's scary.
So when you work with people, and obviously there are many contexts, but what do you love to do within that?
It's to make a relationship so that slowly over time, especially with addiction, you're really, in a very gentle way, coaxing somebody to come back to life.
And that there's so much within that, right?
Yeah, because trauma shuts you down from life. You know, it's like being present has hurt you so much that it doesn't even make sense biologically to be present. It makes sense biologically. It's adaptive to go to dorsal when you've been that hurt, right? But we know from top-down ways of understanding things that we get into these trauma feedback loops where, we're shifting in our bodies from that flight, fight, sympathetic charge down into folding into dorsal, and then sometimes back again. And that's a loop that we can help people shift out of. And two of the most powerful ways I've found to do that are both very embodied, and they're about an introspective process of focusing. So teaching people slowly over time and showing somebody that you can make little moments of safety. And that's all we really have anyway, right?
Right.
I mean, you and I don't know what's going on in the next minute or so.
Right, definitely. So what would a little bit of that look like? How would you introduce or invite someone to begin that interoception?
Yeah. The other process, I just want to say, there's two, and that's what my felt sense polyvagal model is. The first one is the felt sense, and it's interoceptive. And the other is the autonomic nervous system. It's neuroception, Steve Porges' word, right? Those are the two really powerful ways that we can read bodies and then also teach people how to read their own processes in their own body. So what I do is I just start like we all do. We make a relationship. That's co-regulation. We have to connect a little bit. And once you start to feel like the person is with you a little bit, and that can take a long time and it can take a short time. It really, I think, depends on so many things, who you are, who they are,
right,
the point of time. And then I just look for little openings, I call them, in the body. So maybe a person is telling me something and a tear falls down their cheek and they don't even know that it's rolling. Or they get tight in their throat, or you can see them hunch up. Bodies talk to us all the time. It's just we're not taught to watch and listen to them. That we're taught to listen to the words.
right.
And that's a mistake, I think. The words are important, but more important, because bodies don't lie, So when I see something like that, like a person's gulping or they're tied up or a tear comes, if I feel like it's okay, I might draw attention and say, I noticed when we said that, but there was this little tear that fell down your cheek there. And you say it very gently, carefully. Because the last thing you want to do is embarrass or shame somebody, right? Or frighten them. So that's the art of it, right? We can teach what to do, but the art of it is you feel into the relationship and the attachment. And when you start to feel that they have some kind of safe enough attachment with you, you can start to help them notice what's happening in their body.
It's so interesting to hear you talk, because as you're saying what sounds so simple, there's so much going on. I mean, just your demeanor, the gentleness, what you're saying, how you're saying it, what you're drawing attention to, all of these things again. And again, every situation is different. All people are different. But for many people who've been impacted, certainly by interpersonal trauma, just walking into your office can be, daunting and scary. But just to have that exchange, that relationship, as you're calling it, and just that one word is so pregnant with so many incredible definitions.
The different components of how you make that, right?
Yeah.
Gendlin taught me a lot, and the focusing community, about how to make that kind of, he never called it like a safe container, but that's what we call it. It's kind of, right? And part of it is the primacy of human presence. It's like, if you have a sense that I can listen to you freshly without all my own interpretations.
Right.
This is experiential psychotherapy. It's not interpretive, right? You might have an idea about something that's going on with a client, but as Gendlin says in that quote, if you read the whole thing, he says, if there's an idea, a concept you have about what might be going on, you can kind of go into that place beside you, find it, and offer it up. I wonder, Guy, if some of that has to do with, that stuff you talked to me about your dad.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, this is about what happened with you and your dad. Mm-hmm. It's a suggestion because it honors, the body knows what's right or wrong, not us, and so it's a very different way of working. And I believe it creates an enormous amount of safety because people feel that you really see them and you value what they think and how they feel and what they've done to survive, which is all adaptive. I really believe addictions it's complex in terms of the biology and whatever, but they function really as propellers that shift us back and forth from sympathetic to dorsal and back again. That's what they're designed to do. And I think they're instinctive. It's just how bodies work.
Do you believe that behind most addictions there is trauma?
Yeah. Because, and again, the beauty of this is if from a polyvagal lens, from a nervous system lens, you can say, yes, of course, because if you look, I created a model that has 6 kind of states that are part of the nervous system in it. And it's like a visual, a graphic model. You can download it on my website. And you can see in that model that all of those states of defense, the flight, fight, and the freeze state, and the folding in, we call it folding in and collapsing, they're all part of a dysregulated trauma feedback loop. And addictions don't happen in the other states, the blended states that are ventral, because we don't need them. Right? When you feel grounded and safe enough, you don't need to shift back and forth between dysregulated states. You're cruising along. Life's good. You're lucky.
All right, let's just pause here for a second to thank our sponsors. All right, we are back. The body, when I first started, when I was in graduate school and began to learn about embodiment, I was completely out of my element. I was like, what do you mean? Yeah, that was me. I was so much up into my head. And for some people, of course, it comes easier, and for others it doesn't. But you're talking about the safety and this trust, and how does that happen? How do you introduce that to someone?
Well, I think it goes back to presence, the quality of your presence. I think you create safety by honoring another person's truth, by not imposing your own. So if I can listen to you freshly, I'm honoring you and not placing something on you. That feels good when somebody can really hear what you say and think and really respect it. That feels good, right? When somebody can be gentle and loving and vulnerable in their own shaky being, as Gendlin would say, that was his language. We are all shaky beings. And that's the second paragraph in that beautiful quote he talks about. So that's there, but it's there in a way that there's a strength in that container. It's like, I'm leading this. I respect where you're going to go, but I'm holding you. And I'm not afraid to do that. And there are certain boundaries that we need to share and agree upon in order to have this safe container. And without that, I don't have what I need to be able to help you. So we got to come to an agreement on what they are.
Was this way of being, of working, very natural to you?
Yeah, because it's what I wanted when I went to see a therapist. And actually, I think he gave it to me. And I think that's part of why it just felt right. And I knew a lot about what to do, even though I was like, I would think I was 26 or something when I started that. My first job, that group was with women who were incest survivors. And I just got plunked into this job. And what the hell was I going to do? But I knew 2 things. I knew that I had to be able to listen with what I call non-pathologizing ears. I knew I never believed that people were, that whole thing about being sick. It just didn't make any sense to me. Dysregulated, struggling, yes. Struggling, yes. But to really just listen to how they were adapting to their life and their struggles, and respecting that, and helping them to respect themselves for what they were doing in attempts to survive. So there was that. And the other thing is that I knew I had to try in whatever way to help us to be safe enough to be present, which meant some things that are pretty obvious, like confidentiality and whatever, but things like making sure the doors stayed closed in a hospital setting. Nobody was going to barge in for 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Making sure that they knew that I was going to show up next week.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't going to leave because it was too hard to hear the horror of what they were telling us in the group, right?
How did you deal with that as a fresh therapist?
Yeah, that was hard because back then nobody talked about vicarious trauma. They didn't. I mean, we didn't. But we had it. I definitely had it. I can remember feeling totally traumatized by what I was hearing. Yeah. But I also had a lot of support and privilege. And I have always had this little person inside that's pretty insightful. I don't know where she came from, but I have. And that somehow has always guided me towards going towards what helps us to grow and feel, I guess what people are now talking about is gratitude. We didn't talk about that back then much either, and I had a support group. We had a small group of feminist therapists who met, who I still know, some of them. And we read Judith Herman and we gobbled and then along came Bessel van der Kolk and all those people early on. And we supported each other. But it took a while for us to talk about how what we were hearing was affecting us in our bodies. Mm-hmm. Eventually we did, though. But it was hard.
I'm imagining that for many newer clinicians, there's this compulsion almost to want to give, which oftentimes can feel like putting knowledge upon someone.
Yeah.
But you're not talking about that at all. Was there ever that feeling in you? I mean, you're plunked down in this intense group with women.
Well, there is a lot of I do a lot of psychoeducation and polyvagal theory. There's a lot of psychoeducation, but it's delivered within the context of believing in the essence of what helps us to heal, which is to be a human being with another human being and to know how to create a safe container and to lead. And I think, it's important to really know how to lead as a therapist, right? To not be afraid to take some sense of empowerment sometimes because people are lost. Mm-hmm. They're lost.
What might that look like? Taking a sense of empowerment, what does that look like?
Well, really reinforcing a boundary, for example, like if a client doesn't want to come or they want to, I'll come and see you every 3 weeks. And I know I can't do this work with you every 3 weeks. I need you to show up and be with me and I can see you and see how you're doing every week. Otherwise, we don't have a safe container, that kind of thing, where we're not afraid to say, these are the things that I believe we need in order to set things up. Right. Right now I'm writing, just starting to write a workbook for the general public on using my model with trauma and addiction. And I'm having fun with that. And one of the things I'm spending a lot of time on is the introduction of how to set it up. And I think that's a really important thing that we don't probably spend enough time on, is setting up the journey. Making sure people have enough of what they need to go on the journey, because it's a horrible journey in a lot of ways. It is. I mean, we know that. We know it's going to come, and it's like transition and giving birth. It's really tough. So we need to make sure we've got what we need to go on that journey together.
Such as what? You mean resources you're talking about, or? I'm
talking about enough safety. How do marginalized people, how do trans people, how do queer people, how do people of color, how do we act as allies and support people to be able to be safe enough in their bodies to go on the journey? Because if you don't have enough safety, it just has where we started, where you said traumatized people aren't going to go in there. That's true. So sometimes a lot of what we need to do is instrumental. It's like, do you have enough food to eat? Do you have a roof over your head? Are you safe in your home?
Right.
You know, because if you're not, we're not going on that journey. And, you know, this goes back to Judith Herman, right? Establishing safety is the first part of that 3-part journey that she talks about. It's before that, we were, you know, I was sending women to groups and stuff and they were just being totally re-traumatized because people were doing like heavy duty work, primal scream work and stuff like that. And there wasn't enough safety.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really Judith Herman in her book, Trauma and Recovery, where she said, wait a minute, we need to have this 3-phased, and that's still very much a part of what we do now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it just speaks so clearly and nicely with polyvagal theory that we have to have enough safety. Safety is the North Star. Safety guides us. So, and even in the book, I'm talking about you need to make sure that you have a private space that's quiet and available to you so that you can sit quietly by yourself and concentrate while you're using the book. So all of that is just so important. It's like you're going on a canoe trip. You got to make sure you've got enough supplies. You've got enough food to last you when you're going over the rapids, you know? And I'm not sure that we really talk about that enough.
Right. Those things almost seem so obvious.
Yeah, but they're not, right?
But they're not obvious. And certainly a lot of people,
that.
Yeah. A lot of people are like, what do you mean have a private space for myself? No, I can't. I don't.
Yeah, I don't. And some people can't have it.
Right.
So then it's like, okay, well, then maybe that's the thing to start with. Before you even go on the journey or open my book further, just start with that. Have you got those things that you need? You know, or even a safe place to keep the materials that you're going to develop while you're in therapy or you're using whatever workbook or whatever you're doing. You know, do you have a way of keeping that safe so that other people don't see it? And people, you know, that's not something you really think about either. But once you get into the work, you realize it's incredibly important. So working with addiction, people are ashamed of writing down the things that they've done or that they want to change. And especially with sex addiction. So, you know, it's like, okay, well, let's think about that. How do you make a safe container for all of the materials and the tools and the journaling and the process recording and all that you're going to be doing? Yeah.
This, I just want to remind everyone, I'm speaking with Jan Winhall. Jan, how do people get in touch with you? What's the best way?
janwinhall.com, my website.
Okay.
I'm since I guess the last time I was with you, I've been teaching. I'm an educational partner with the Polyvagal Institute, and I've been teaching a course there that honestly, Guy, has been amazing. The people that have come. We're just wrapping up the first one. The next one starts in May on my book. The first Saturday of May. So it's every one Saturday a month. We do focusing partnerships. So we work together in partnerships. And that has changed everything. That was Jenlyn's idea, right? You work together and you have a practice of focusing in partnerships. And so we take the ideas and the concepts, which I love, but we bring them into the body. And we do it together. So
do it together with another colleague or
okay. Each student is partnered with somebody else and they meet 15 times over the 6 months and they get a certificate from the Focusing Institute and also from the Polyvagal Institute. And then you're really I had to do that because I had to know that when people use the model that they were doing it in an embodied way.
Right.
And also that we have to do our own work because we are our instrument. And if we don't know what's going on inside us, how are we ever going to invite somebody to come along with us? So people are growing. They're saying things like, well, I signed up. I never knew I was going to learn all this about myself.
Well,
but the transformations are incredible.
Yeah, that's amazing. We can get that link will be on your website.
Yeah.
Okay. We can also put that in the show notes at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. But that idea of, being a human with another human being, it sounds so simple. We rattles off our tongues in one simple sentence, and yet there's so much behind that, right? I mean, the way you talk, it sounds so simple. It sounds so effortless, but it's not for many people, for many therapists.
No, it's not. But it's getting better, Guy. I mean, I look around now and I see lots of people who are really in the spotlight, who are willing to share a lot of vulnerability. And I'm doing it a lot too, because it helps people.
Right.
When you share your story, it really helps people to know we're all just shaky beings. I mean, come on.
Right.
Who are we kidding?
Right.
And people that in the world that want to be like the kind of narcissistic, it's all about me. I mean, really. Yeah. I think what's so beautiful is that there are a lot of really great therapists out there now who are sharing information. They don't want to, it's not about the glory. It's about being real and really changing the world, because we're in big trouble.
Yeah.
We're in big trouble. And so that's an amazing thing, right? And yeah, it is hard for most people because we're not socialized to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But once you're in there and you can feel that sense of grounding that comes from being just, a shaky being, it's so wonderful. You just don't want to stop. It just keeps growing, and you meet more and more people that have that same capacity because they've developed it. It's just, you develop it over time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of us are older that are speaking out now. Mm-hmm. And we're elders and we have wisdom. We've done a lot of work. We've been doing this work for a long time.
Yeah. People
like Janina Fisher that I had a chat with, I introduced her at the Polyvagal conference. It was so lovely. It's just amazing.
She's incredible.
She is. Yeah. And she's just a person. Hey, Jan, I like your scarf. Come on, really. It's I love that part of what's happening in the world there. Yeah, it's really cool.
That's awesome. I mean, that's what I hope this podcast is about. And that's why I invited you back, because you're just amazing. You are. I love talking to you. And like I said before, your energy is just so inspiring. I can't wait to get this out there. Jan, we'll have your website linked up, and I'm excited to get that link to the new course workshop.
Yeah, on polyvagalinstitute.org. You can't sign up until the beginning of April, I think. But yes, I mean, honestly, it's been an amazing experience for me teaching that group.
Awesome. Well, you are invited back anytime.
Well, that's wonderful.
Thank you so much for being here.
Okay.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.